So, I've been wanting to do this for a little while now. I've been watching through King of the Hill, and there's a lot of really interesting examples of gender nonconformity from one Bobby Hill, the son, or let's say the child, of series headliner Hank Hill. And yes, some of you may be aware that Jen of Fundy Fridays recently released a similar retrospective on King of the Hill, and yes, I had the idea to do this before she released that, and it really is covering different territory anyway, but yeah, that does exist, and I am aware of it, and I will be citing it as appropriate, which actually doesn't come up as much as I thought it might, because yeah, the religious and gender stuff, oddly enough, don't have a lot of overlap. Also, this article from Ranker.com was very helpful in compiling a list of episodes to talk about, and is worth a read. Link in the description. Also, I guess you can type it in from where it is across the screen, but that's not very practical. Now, I should mention that this really isn't a retrospective for me, as I did not grow up watching King of the Hill. So this isn't a nostalgic rewatch for me. This is a first-time watch-through with my impressions as I'm seeing it as an adult for the first time. And as this is my first watch-through, I don't have any particular predisposition to like any particular characters. And as such, I do have to open with a rather controversial opinion. I absolutely hate Hank Hill. I'm sure that's going to piss some people off, and bye. Thanks for this much of a view, I guess. Nice knowing you. For anyone who has not left, let's continue. But yeah, I hate Hank Hill. If this was exclusively Hank Hill's series, I would have stopped watching a long time ago. But fortunately, I found an unexpected connection with Bobby Hill, and so I continued watching pretty much exclusively for him. So this is the story of how I came to relate to and root for Bobby Hill. So let's start at the beginning, with the very first episode of King of the Hill, simply titled Pilot. Wow, how original. Truly inspiring. I actually first heard about King of the Hill when some of my then co-workers were watching it in the break room at work, and I found it mildly intriguing. Possibly because A, it wasn't the news, and B, it was a hell of a lot better than Family Guy. And so, a few years later, I looked it up. Okay, so I wasn't that intrigued, clearly, but I got around to it eventually. So anyway, I started watching the first episode of King of the Hill, and the very first scene between Hank and Bobby is a joke about how kids these days and their out-of-touch music sounds like farts.
What you listening to, son? Mother of God, it's all toilet sounds.
Which is pretty much ripped verbatim from a exact same joke in South Park. And yes, I am deeply ashamed that I know that the original joke is from South Park.
That boy ain't right. The boy ain't right. That boy ain't right.
It's like being miscast and then getting bad reviews for it.
There's really not much of note in the first episode, aside from establishing the fact that Hank wants Bobby to be good at sports, but Bobby just isn't interested.
You ready to kick some wildcat butt, Bobby?
Now, of course, this in and of itself doesn't actually mean anything, but it will serve as foreshadowing for things to come. Also, this is where we learn that Hank has some serious anger problems.
Mister, I have not begun to project my anger onto you.
I'm sure that won't cause any problems down the line. The episode involves Bobby struggling with feelings of inadequacy, as he feels like he's a disappointment to his father, which results in Peggy, Hank's wife and Bobby's mother, telling Hank to tell Bobby that he loves him unconditionally. But Hank says that he can't do that.
I want you to tell Bobby that your love for him is unconditional.
Well, I can't say that.
Wow! Hank is terrible. I mean, sure, he does manage to get it out eventually.
You know, feelings of fondness and, you know what I mean, don't you, boy?
No.
Mostly, but still, Hank is terrible. Also, this is where we're first introduced to Luann, Bobby's cousin slash basically sister, who's more or less an orphan, and so Hank and Peggy more or less adopt her. Incidentally, this makes the recurring theme of Hank trying to evict Luann kind of horrifying. But I'm getting kind of off topic. Anyway, on to the next relevant episode. Square Peg. Because who doesn't love a good pun? Or a bad pun? Or a nonsensical pun? I guess the writers of this show like all of those things. This one is technically about sex education, but considering that the plot involves Hank being upset about what Bobby is being taught in school, and the general discourse about trans people in school, and Floridian bills about don't say gay being applied evenly to gay and trans people, and how the conservative narrative really does not make any distinguishment whatsoever, yeah, this seems pretty relevant to talk about. So Hank tears up the permission slip, which is a thing that people are legally allowed to do for reasons beyond belief, and so Hank teaches Bobby about sex himself, by taking him to a breeding farm and saying this.
You're coming to a time in your life when you're gonna start to have tender feelings for a girl.
Wow, how cis-heteronormative of you. Anyway, Hank quickly gives up on the idea about teaching Bobby about sex. Not because he realized he was being stupid, mind you, but just because he realized it was too hard. Also, Dale, Hank's friend slash possible serial killer, calls in a hit on the sex ed teacher, resulting in Peggy getting the substitute teacher position.
Some right-wing maniac just called the health teacher with a death threat, and she quit.
That's a lot. Also this.
We all grew up not knowing the real words for your dinky and your woohoo, and we turned out fine.
Jesus Christ! This is exactly why we need sex ed! Also, Hank might be gay?
I don't mean to be rude or nothing, but I'll pass.
Vagina!
You're dealing with organs that people just don't want to know about.
Okay, well, moving on.
Come on, Bobby, can't you think of something pleasant?
Straight sex isn't pleasant to you? Damn it, I'm trying to move on here.
I just wanted to say you don't have to worry about me, 'cause I'm never gonna have sex.
Oh, Bobby, now don't say that.
I thought that's what you wanted.
And so the episode ends with Bobby Hill avoiding having to learn about sex at home by getting to learn about it from his mother as the substitute teacher teaching his class, and he's the only one in said class because none of the other kids got their permission slips signed. Wow, that isn't an improvement at all! God, this show is depressing. Why am I doing this again? So the next episode we get is Season 2, Episode 6, Husky Bobby, in which Hank is horribly ashamed of Bobby's weight, but Bobby decides to make the most of it and become a plus-size model. Which is pretty cool if you can get past the child labor and other implications. Hank, of course, is upset because he knows all too well that kids who are different get bullied in school, as evidenced by a sad little flashback wherein, yeah, Hank is the bully calling another kid fat.
Victimize the one who's different. Believe me, I know. Hey, fatty! You are fat!
That checks out. Fuck Hank! Also, it's worth noting that the language that Hank consistently uses in this episode is that everyone will make fun of Bobby for being different. Queer, you might say. Plus, there's the fact that modeling has generally been seen as a stereotypically female profession, so this could definitely be seen as a trans allegory. But either way, it's definitely a bit of body positivity, so that's nice. And rare. Also this.
Somewhere along the line, we forgot to teach Bobby shame.
Yeah, I refer you to my earlier clip. Fuck Hank. So Hank pulls Bobby out of the competition at the last minute, causing Bobby to lament,
Why are you always trying to turn me into you? Why can't you accept me for who I am?
which, yeah, sure, that's certainly relatable for everyone, but it has an extra layer of meaning if we apply a trans reading. Next up, in Season 2, Episode 8, The Son Who Got Away, Bobby ends up getting in trouble at school, and then getting in even more trouble at home, and so he runs away, along with his best friend Connie. Basically doing the whole teenage dream thing of run away and don't ever look back, except the asexual version of that. Like, when they end up in the makeout cave, Bobby is not remotely interested in making out, leading to a weird bit of cognitive dissonance with Hank, where initially he's concerned that Bobby might do something, and then he's even more concerned that Bobby might not do something.
Say, why aren't you nervous about my Bobby? I tell you what, many a good boy's gone bad in the boneyard.
Thus giving us a little foreshadowing to the ongoing arc of Hank suspecting that Bobby might be gay, with predictable disapproval. Going back to Katy Perry's Teenage Dream, it's kind of funny, but this episode actually reminded me of how I used to listen to that song and interpret it in a completely asexual way. Like, I thought it was about two friends who, after being disowned by their respective families, decided to run away together to start a new life together, but, like, as friends. Sex never entered into it for me, and it never occurred to me that it would be a sexual fantasy for anyone else. In fact, when I first found out that this song was supposed to be an explicitly sexual fantasy, I was pretty thoroughly disgusted by that revelation. It kind of ruined the song for me for a while. But eventually I was able to return to it and appreciate it the way I originally had, applying a death of the author reading to it. And no, that's not a threat, it's a literary trope. Read a book! Anyway, getting back to King of the Hill, does this mean that I think that Bobby Hill is asexual? Well, no, not necessarily. He's still prepubescent, so he could be pre-sexual. It could really go either way at this point. And on that note, I do feel the need to explain here that asexual refers to adults, or at least post-pubescent people, who have little or no sexual desire. It does not mean that they're developmentally delayed, or that they haven't gotten around to it yet, or that they need to just try it because they might like it. Asexual people are not broken, so stop trying to fix us. Anyway, the episode ends with Hank finding Bobby and bringing him back home, resetting everything to factory settings for the next episode. Also this.
My dad used to punish me by telling me I was a girl. He used to make me wear dresses. Pretty, pretty dresses.
The less said about that, the better. Moving on. Season 2, Episode 10, Bobby Slam, opens with Bobby and Connie playing a wrestling video game, and Connie lamenting about how there's no girl characters to play as.
Don't they have any girl wrestlers in this game?
Meanwhile, at school, Peggy is recruited to be the emergency girls' gym teacher on account of they forgot to hire a girls' gym teacher. And no, this is not because of a progressive integrated gym class with boys and girls, as should obviously be the case. No, this is because the school board thought that girls didn't need gym, so they didn't hire anyone, and there was no class, and they had to scramble at the last minute when, surprise, surprise, girls wanted to take gym class. What the fuck is wrong with people? Also this.
What if Bobby was a girl?
Well, that's just it, Peggy. I don't think we have to worry about that anymore.
I don't think I'm still needed here. That was blatant! Well, I already went through all the trouble of starting this thing, so I guess I'll finish. And I went through all the trouble of setting up that brilliant background that's not half-assed at all. So back at school, the girls' gym class gets kicked out of the gym during class time because the girls' class is not supposed to take up space. Wow. Also this.
Title IX guarantees equal athletic opportunities for all boys and girls.
Roe versus Wade doesn't apply to my wrestling team.
Oh, I think you'll find it does apply.
That didn't age well. Or maybe it did. Kind of more relevant now.
Mrs. Hill, isn't Roe versus Wade?
Yeah, I know, dear, but you have to pick your battles.
So Connie decides to sign up for the boys' gym class, causing the boys' gym teacher to throw a fit. And predictably, this creates a bit of a rift between Hank and Peggy. And for the record, Connie does identify as a girl. This isn't a trans boy thing. It's just, this is literally the only class available because the girls' class is a joke. At best. But in practice, it doesn't even make the status of joke. It's non-existent.
It's all well and good to talk about equal rights until some man loses his job.
Oh, for fuck's sake. And also...
You lose, you no longer my son!
Oh hey, more gender fuckery. We'll come back to that later. So the episode ends with Bobby and Connie facing off against each other in a wrestling match, and they put on a bit of a show for the audience, while simultaneously giving a metaphorical middle finger to the abusive gym coach. Well played, well played. Anyway, let's quickly circle back around to Season 1, Episode 7, Westy Side Story. We skipped over this one before because it's not much of a Bobby story, and it mostly sucks, but it is still relevant. It starts with Connie and her parents, Con and Min, moving into the neighborhood. There's a bit of early foreshadowing when Hank assumes that Connie will be a boy based on, well, nothing really, and then he's shocked and horrified to see that she's a girl. For fuck's sake, what is wrong with Hank Hill? Though, to be fair, he is mostly shocked and horrified that the family is Asian. Again, what the fuck is wrong with Hank Hill? Specifically, their Laotian, but of course Hank doesn't know or care about the difference between various types of Asian people, and so we just get a whole lot of racism. Fun times, fun times. Anyway, the relevant part of this episode comes when Bobby asks Connie why her father calls her Con Jr. To which Connie replies, "My father wanted a boy." And Bobby replies, "So did mine."
Why are you named Con Jr.?
My father wanted a boy.
Yeah, so did mine.
Wow, that says a lot about both of them. I can't recommend this episode, though. That one clip I showed you is literally the only good part of this entire episode, and it is surrounded by a whole lot of racism. Like, a whole lot. Moving on to Season 2, Episode 21, Life in the Fast Lane, Bobby's Saga, which is quite a title. Seriously, that's a real mouthful. Bobby wants to sign up for cooking classes, but Hank tells him no. Even going so far as to tell him that it will only happen over his dead body.
Someday, I'm going to die. And when that happens, then you can go to cooking school.
Wow, Hank is terrible. So instead, Hank signs Bobby up to be a food vendor at the local racetrack, where he's exploited by an abusive boss, who makes Bobby pay for all the snacks while keeping all the profit for himself. So, Hank would rather have Bobby be exploited by a child labor racket than allow him to do something that he wants to do that's even the tiniest bit feminine. As if cooking is inherently feminine in the first place. Also, Bobby's abusive boss is portrayed as a stereotypical mentally handicapped person, so that's a fun bit of ableism. Also, this is doubly harmful because it implies that this type of toxic workplace can only come about if the boss is mentally handicapped, which is not true. This type of exploitative environment is incredibly common, and the boss is never mentally handicapped. This is an intended part of capitalism, functioning as intended with bosses who know full well what they're doing. Plus, due to ableism, mentally handicapped people are never even allowed to advance to the point of being in charge in the first place. So this whole thing just feels like the worst kind of propaganda. So Hank almost gets Bobby killed several times through numerous safety violations, including heat stroke and traffic accidents. Wow! But it's okay, because Hank steps in to save Bobby at the last minute, learning his lesson about... Actually, no, fuck it. He doesn't learn his lesson at all. He just learns to not trust mentally handicapped people. What the fuck is wrong with this guy? Moving on to Season 3, Episode 2, They Call It Bobby Love. Bobby gets his first girlfriend, initially making Hank relieved that Bobby isn't gay, but then it turns out that Bobby's new girlfriend is a vegetarian.
Well, I'm a vegetarian, Bobby.
And Hank immediately disapproves, saying that a vegetarian once stole from him, and he's conflated all vegetarians into a monolith and is teaching Bobby to fear and distrust anyone different. Much like how conservatives, like Hank himself, view gay and trans people. A monolith and different and to be feared and distrusted, and they're just crazy like vegetarians. That's his words, not mine. So Bobby's girlfriend eventually breaks up with him. Obviously, we wouldn't want to upset the precious status quo. And when Bobby tells his parents, Hank doesn't even pretend to be upset about it, because he's terrible.
And dating's all about who wins and who loses.
But then, in a surprise twist, we learn that Peggy is also terrible, as she rubs it in how she's so much better at relationships than Bobby is. Wow! What the fuck is wrong with these people?
Oh, it doesn't feel so good, does it, son? I guess your love wasn't as strong as your father's and mine, now was it?
And speaking of what the hell is wrong with these people, we can't forget about the infamous Season 3, Episode 14, The Wedding of Bobby Hill, wherein a prank war gets out of hand. Bobby replaces Luann's birth control with sweet tarts, and Luann, realizing exactly what he did, pretends to be pregnant.
Every woman has to take a birth control pill every day or else they get pregnant.
Which, yeah, Bobby was certainly wrong to do that, and he needs to learn his lesson, so Luann pretending to be pregnant to get back at him makes sense, and is a reasonable response. No, what isn't reasonable is that Hank and Peggy get involved and decide that Bobby needs to do the right thing and marry Luann.
By doing the right thing, of course. You're gonna have to marry Luann.
Sort of scared straight by marrying your cousin thing. Because I guess marrying your cousin is better than being gay. What the fuck? And then, after the ceremony, Hank and Peggy even go so far as to convince Luann that it was all real, apparently to teach her a lesson about teaching Bobby a lesson, even though they were the ones to take it too far. What? Yeah, the less said about this one, the better. I've said too much already. So moving on to Season 4, Episode 12, Rodeo Days, Hank wants Bobby to work in the rodeo, and Bobby technically does, getting a job as a rodeo clown. But Hank is still not happy because Bobby took a sport that's rugged and manly and somehow made it colorful and flamboyant. But he is still at least happy that this at least means that Bobby isn't inside playing video games.
And it keeps him away from the video games. He was playing this Tomb Raider game where he was a girl.
Also this.
Allow me to turn the other cheek.
That's not relevant, it's just funny. So Hank and Peggy take turns blaming themselves and each other for the way that Bobby turned out. Wow, these people are horrible. But then Bobby saves Joseph from getting trampled, which is enough to relieve at least some of the shame that Hank and Peggy are feeling for having a clown for a son. Yeah, that's the moral we're going with here. Next up, we have Season 6, Episode 1, Bobby Goes Nuts, wherein Bobby gets beaten up by some bullies outside of his own house, and Hank does absolutely nothing to rescue him. He even goes so far as to tell Bobby that he's not going to fight his battles for him anymore.
There is only one person who can fight your battles for you. And I know you don't want to hear this, but that person is you.
And so, left with basically no other recourse, Bobby signs up for a women's self-defense class. What was he supposed to do? And it works! The next time the bullies come around, Bobby goes for the nuts. And justice is served. And of course, Bobby gets detention for it. Because of course he does. Bullies beating up smaller children is fine, but a smaller child defending themselves against a bully? Absolutely unacceptable! Hank and Peggy get called into the principal's office to talk about Bobby's fighting, meaning defending himself the first time and defending other kids who are getting bullied after that. And of course, Bobby is the only one getting in trouble here because that's just how the American public school system works. Hank is initially proud of Bobby for fighting.
You ran away, didn't you?
No, I stayed and fought. And I won!
Well, all right, son.
Because he's terrible, but then he's horrified to learn where Bobby learned it from. Hank tells Bobby that it is never acceptable to hit someone below the belt, which is absolute bullshit. He was being attacked. You do what you need to do in that situation. Hank even punches Bobby in the nose and then has the audacity to play the victim when Bobby retaliates with a nut shot. Even though Hank justified his nose shot by saying that he was teaching Bobby a lesson about never leaving himself open, but when Hank left himself open, I guess Bobby was just not supposed to take advantage of the nut shot. Fucking hypocrites! This whole episode plays as propaganda justifying bullying and condemning self-defense. Also, it's worth noting that in light of the previous clip where we saw that Hank was himself a school bully back in his school days, it is obvious that Hank would much rather Bobby be a bully than be the one being bullied. And that is really why he is ashamed of his kid. Because he's like, how dare you not be a bully? You're supposed to be the biggest, meanest bully ever. Didn't I teach you right? And I suppose, given the two options, that's technically better. But this is a particularly egregious example of Hank desperately clinging to a false binary. Maybe Bobby can be neither bullied nor bullied. Maybe he can defend the other kids from bullies? No, that's completely unacceptable. So Hank is hamming it up for all it's worth, pretending to have been completely incapacitated by that nut shot, and he can't even leave the couch, which I don't buy for a second. It's not that bad, and certainly not for that long. Stop being a wuss. Hank tells Bobby to stop playing video games because that's his punishment for defending himself. Bobby finally shows some backbone by asserting boundaries against his father's abusive behavior, but Hank just sets Peggy on him and she literally wrestles the game away from him. And the moral of the story is bullying is fine, but don't you dare defend yourself. I fucking hate this episode. Despite some good setup, they did not stick the landing. If this was intended to be anti-bullying and pro-self-defense, it did not come through at all. This episode could have been one of the best, but instead it is one of the worst. It needed a different ending. They needed to address the school's bullshit and Hank's hypocrisy, but all we get is this weak-ass centrist bullshit of, maybe Hank and Bobby were both wrong. Yeah, fuck that. But still, Bobby taking a women's self-defense class will always be awesome.
That's my purse! I don't know you!
That's where the episode ended. 2 minutes in. Better episode for it. Next up, we have Season 7, Episode 4, Goodbye to Normal Jeans. Hank walks in on Bobby holding a cheerleader dress, and...
What the... There better be a naked cheerleader under your bed.
Wow. You know, it's really amazing how quickly conservatives go from, you'd better not be having straight sex, to, you'd better be having straight sex. Amazing. Yeah, let that sink in for a moment. Anyway, it turns out that the reason why Bobby has the dress is because he's taking a home ec class, and the assignment that week is to get the stain out of the dress. And upon learning that, Hank is still not happy, because boys don't take home ec. Because if boys knew how to take care of themselves, then they would have no motivation to get married. What the fuck? But of course, Hank changes his mind as soon as he learns that Bobby is a better cook than Peggy is. You know, once he can get something out of it. And then, in a bit of a role reversal, Peggy becomes the one who's upset that Bobby is taking a home ec class, because she feels like she's being upstaged by him. Oh, how dare he be better at cooking than she is. These people are horrible.
If the man you love found someone else to cook for him and clean for him and make his pants...
Who is this other woman?
The other woman is my son.
Jesus Christ, these fucking people! And then, through a series of shenanigans that are far too dumb to even mention, Bobby ends up sleeping with Hank, and Peggy sleeps in Bobby's bed. What the fuck is going on here? What are we even supposed to take from this? Is this supposed to be a cautionary tale about the dangers of letting your son take a home ec class because he'll become gay and steal your husband, even though your husband is his father, and thus he's fulfilling the prophecy about murdering his mother and marrying his father? What the fuck is going on here? Jesus Christ, what the fuck even is this episode? Anyway, on to Season 7, Episode 6, The Sun Also Roses. Hank and Bobby are playing football in the front yard, and of course Hank is upset that Bobby isn't better at it. Because Hank wants Bobby to play on the football team that he was on in his high school days. Because Hank wants to live vicariously through Bobby, and is upset that his avatar isn't good enough. Have I mentioned that I hate Hank? So Bobby gets signed up to be the towel boy, which is some child labor bullshit right there, but he hates it, so he quits to pursue his real passion, growing roses. But of course, Hank being Hank, Bobby knows that he wouldn't approve, and so Bobby has to grow roses in secret. In the closets, even. The literal closets. He grows roses in his closets. Subtle. Because Hank's intolerance has literally forced Bobby into the literal closets. There's unsubtlety, and then there's this. Hank is absolutely livid about Bobby daring to quit the towel job, and so he bursts into Bobby's room to demand answers, and of course he finds the contraband roses. But after getting over his initial anger, Hank decides to be uncharacteristically supportive of Bobby, as long as Bobby does it competitively, and keeps doing it in the closet so that the neighbors don't know that he's growing roses. Seriously. This is actually the episode that convinced me that I needed to do this essay. There is just so much here. Hank wants Bobby to do sports, but Bobby doesn't want to do sports. Bobby wants to grow roses, so Hank turns growing roses into a sport. And then Hank takes over growing the roses because Bobby isn't doing it right. And it's all about winning, which Bobby doesn't care about.
It's got more personality than those other ones.
Uh-huh, but we're out to win.
Bobby just wants to grow roses, but Hank can't let him do it without becoming an overbearing jackass and controlling everything.
You better let me do that, son.
Also this.
Here, like this.
Hands off! You're queering the spiral.
That's right. Bobby is queering something that Hank is trying to co-opt and make straight. Could this be any more blatant queer erasure? At least in this episode, the writers seem to be aware of what Hank is doing and are calling him out on it. That makes a huge difference. So moving on to Season 8, Episode 2, Reborn to be Wild, Hank catches Bobby rocking out to music while wearing a long wig.
Now, I know you've got a rule about wigs, but this is just temporary until I can grow my own.
Hank is predictably upset, but it's worth noting that his objection is far more likely to be to do with the idea that boys shouldn't have long hair than to do with the cultural appropriation aspects of Bobby wearing locks. So for the purposes of this analysis, we'll assume the former and set aside the latter. Also, credit to Jen of Fundy Fridays for teaching me that the preferred term is locks. I did not know that before, and I would definitely have said it the other way. Anyway, after that long aside, Hank takes Bobby to a Christian group so that Bobby can learn the error of his ways and whatnot. But if you want a full breakdown of that, just go watch Jen's video. I've already made the point I was trying to make. Though before I go, I will play you this clip.
Even Jesus had long hair.
Only because I wasn't his dad.
Yeah, enough said. Moving on. Then we have Season 11, Episode 3, Blood and Sauce, wherein Hank is upset to find Bobby baking a cake because cooking isn't for boys. Wait, didn't they already do this exact same thing in another episode? And didn't it get really weird really fast? Well, no. This time is totally different, because this time Hank decides to have Bobby cook the barbecue on the grill, because cooking on the grill isn't cooking. Because Hank is an idiot!
But I thought you didn't want me to cook.
It's not cooking, Bobby. It's barbecue.
I mean, it's different, but it's not really better. But then it turns out that Bobby didn't actually help Bill make the barbecue, and Hank is upset, and so he doesn't let Bobby eat dinner. So Hank is upset at Bobby when he cooks, and he's upset at Bobby when he doesn't cook. God, I hate Hank. And then there's Season 12, Episode 1, Sweet Smells of Excess, in which Bobby takes an unexpected interest in football, and Hank is indecently excited about it, on account of Bobby finally liking something manly instead of troll dolls.
I have to capitalize on this. Otherwise, we'll be right back to watching his troll doll performances.
Because there's a set list of things that it's acceptable to like, and a set list of things that it's not acceptable to like. Hell, even Peggy's on board with this. But hey, through a series of complicated shenanigans, football fans everywhere end up wanting to kill Hank Hill, so that's a plus. Wait, no, they missed. Jesus Christ! I think Hank Hill just got someone killed! That was an intense display of toxic masculinity. No wonder he likes it. And that brings us to Season 12, Episode 4, The Powder Puff Boys. Bobby is recruited to the cheerleading squad by a bunch of school bullies. Wait, what?
I got picked for powder puff cheerleading. Don't worry, I've got some great ideas about how to get out of it.
And then, in a bizarre twist, Hank is actually happy about it, and Bobby's the one who's upset about it.
I can't believe you got picked for Powder Puff. This is great.
What?
So Hank takes Bobby dress shopping. What the hell is going on here? So Bobby tells Hank how much he hates cheerleading, and Hank reluctantly allows him to quit. Is this reverse psychology? Okay, so I think what's going on here is that Bobby is upset that the other boys are making a mockery of the fine art of drag, and so Bobby decides to set them straight, so to speak, and decides to stick with it after all.
You know that after this is over, you can't do this anymore, right?
There's the Hank we all know. Also, in a not very shocking at all twist, it turns out that the school is only doing this as a sort of cover for sexual harassment. As in, allowing boys dressed up as girls to go into girls' spaces to make fun of them.
They wear makeup and wigs and act silly.
Boys are making fun of girls?
So that's not great for multiple reasons. Not least of all because of how that looks juxtaposed against bathroom bills and the like. Boys pretending to be girls, sneak into girl spaces, yada yada. Not a good look. So Peggy gives a speech about how gay people should be allowed to be gay, so that's nice, I guess, but that's also not what's going on here. This is a bunch of straight cis boys using the facade of queerness to harass girls. So she's really just confusing the issue here. But again, in the age of bathroom bills, is that really surprising? And finally, we have Season 13, Episode 19, The Boy Can't Help It. Bobby and Joseph are freaking out about not having dates to go to the dance with, or at least Joseph is freaking out about it, and somehow manages to infect Bobby with his horniness, which is an oddly common theme in this series. Joseph is horny, Bobby doesn't care, Joseph convinces Bobby that he should be horny. It happens a lot, a surprising amount. Or not all that surprising of an amount, depending, but it happens a lot. Bobby ends up befriending 3 girls at school, and so he agrees to go on a date with all 3 of them to the prom. And I just realized that sounds like that damn rom-com secret double date thing, so to clarify, no, not like that, as a group thing. So the girls come over to pick Bobby up, and Bobby sits on the back of one of the girls' bikes, and...
Just hop on behind Decca.
Bobby, don't sit back there. What are you doing? Switch.
Oh, for fuck's sake. Of all the things Hank gets upset over, this has got to be the dumbest.
Oh my God. My boy is a girl.
What the fuck is wrong with you? Riding on the back of a bike has nothing to do with gender. That alone has nothing to do with indicating that Bobby might be a girl. Bobby still might be a girl, but that is a completely separate issue. And if Bobby was a trans girl, which he probably is, you definitely would not be okay with that. Yeah, this kind of reminds me of a time when I was a kid, and one of my friends at the time made fun of me by calling me a girl. And I remember being incredibly frustrated by not being able to properly articulate that no, I wasn't offended by the comparison, I was offended that he would use "you're a girl" as an insult. That should not be used as an insult, ever. Incidentally, that's also a problem in military culture, but that's a whole nother can of worms. Anyway, where were we? Oh, right, the bike thing. Yeah, if Hank is that upset over the bike thing, I shudder to think what he'll think of the girls giving Bobby a makeover. And then, after Peggy pretends to be supportive for a second before immediately backing down, we come to...
You're not going anywhere near these girls until you start acting like a boy.
How am I supposed to do that?
You're just supposed to know.
Wow, that is blatant. I actually first came across this quote on a meme of Bobby Hill as a trans girl, and yeah, they're not wrong. So the episode ends with Bobby realizing that the girls didn't actually like him after all, At least not in the way that he was thinking. But then he manages to save them from some bullies, so that is enough for Hank to think that maybe the boy's alright after all. And then, just for good measure, Bobby goes all in with a little toxic masculinity.
And if there is a door, I am opening it for you. Women.
Oh, for fuck's sake! I wonder where he learned that from! And that's pretty much where the original series ends things. But do enjoy this bonus clip from Season 11, Episode 2, Sir PUNt.
Just promise that you'll catch that snake soon. I get more looks and whispers than that bank teller who's in between genders.
Well, that was pleasant. In fact, let me play another clip.
This is our new job. Pissing off Hank Hill.
Finally! Someone to root for! My new favorite character! Though, to be fair, I should also play this clip from Season 12, Episode 4, Death Picks Cotton, to give some context for why Hank is the way he is.
I didn't want you. I wanted a boy.
Yeah, I know, I'm a girl.
Yay! Generational trauma! Incidentally, that's the episode where Cotton finally dies, and he can't even do that right.
I know we don't say it enough, or at all, I guess, but I love you too, Dad.
You loves me? What kind of man tells another man he loves him? I don't want to die with my sissy son who loves me.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Every time I think Hank Hill is the worst, Cotton comes along to remind me that that's not actually true. Then there's this little clip from Season 12, Episode 22, Life, a Loser's Manual.
My name is Bobby, Uncle Hoyt. The doll.
Peggy, I could have swore you told me you had a little girl.
Also, honorable mention to Season 12, Episode 11, Trans Fascism, in which the government bans all trans fats, and Hank Hill is suddenly pro-trans. Fats. Because government interference, and freedom, and whatnot. So yeah, Hank Hill starts an illegal food truck as an act of civil disobedience on account of suddenly being pro-trans. Fats. Actually, on second thought, the less said about that episode, the better. Jesus Christ, that's a title. And finally, enjoy this out-of-context clip.
Nothing is forever. I used to have a penis.
Well, okay. Can't argue with that. So that's pretty much everything from the original series. It'll be interesting to see how they handle everything in the reboot, but that will have to wait for another time. Anyway, Jen of Fundy Fridays ended her video by saying that Bobby Hill walked so that Tina Belcher could run.
Bobby walked so Tina Belcher could run.
And yeah, sure, I can see that in regards to general teenage angst, puberty, that sort of thing. But when it comes to gender subversion specifically, I would have to posit that no. In fact, Bobby Hill walked so that Jean Belcher could run. Speaking of Jean Belcher, now there's a video essay topic. I've got some work to do. I don't have anything prepared for this, but in light of recent events, I would be remiss not to bring this up. So, Jonathan Joss, the voice actor for John Redcorn on King of the Hill, was murdered in San Antonio for being gay. And yeah, that is terrible. That's a terrible hate crime perpetrated by someone who is just very homophobic, and yeah, I don't even know what to say about that. But stuff like this is why rhetoric matters, and why people like Hank Hill really need to be held accountable. Hate crimes like this are on the rise, and the rhetoric that shows like this put forward, normalizing homophobes as the main character, is not helping. Also, not that this makes it any worse, but Jonathan Joss portrayed one of the best characters on the show. A character who, if you just look at the writing, wasn't even very good. Like, the writing makes him out to be a complete asshole. Serial cheater, written in such a way that that was a running joke. And yeah, the writing of this character was absolutely terrible, but Jonathan Joss brought so much charm to his performance that what should have been an insufferable character is honestly one of the best characters. His performance is just that good. Not that that makes a difference. This shouldn't have happened no matter what. But yeah, he was very good at what he did. So yeah, Jonathan Joss will be missed. I'd say happy Pride, but honestly, it's not a very happy Pride, is it? So instead, I'll say remember Stonewall.